Hello and welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Stars sports podcast presented by Underdog. Insert name here. So we're doing this without Blair for the first time. I think this is the first ever podcast that Blair has not been a part of. I'm actually Sam McDowell. I'm here with Jesse Newell, the Chiefs beat writer, and fellow sports columnist Vahe Gregorian. We're all out at Chiefs rookie minicamp over the weekend. We're going to talk about that and talk a little bit Royals. But, I think we should address the elephant in the room that how are we going to do this without Blair, which is a question that all three of us have been asking for the last, 24 hours.
Well, the kind of extra funny part about that is that we're struggling to do it without Blair, even though he provided you the exact script.
Word for word script.
Including insert your name.
It shows his real confidence in our ability to get this done without him, and he's right. He's right. So
it's already been demonstrated.
We're going to give this a shot, but so what we thought this was Jesse's idea. It'd be fun if we each just went around. There's all 7 rookies spoke to the media. All 7 draft picks spoke to the media. A couple of undrafted signees. One rookie camp tryout spoke to us. Jared Casey from KU, who Jesse wrote about today. I'd encourage people to read that at kansascity.com. But we thought it'd be fun if we all just went around and gave a couple of our observations. So Vahe, let's kick it off with you. What was one of your observations from speaking to these guys at rookie minicamp?
Well, one of the things I got interested in was with Jeffrey Bassa, because as a linebacker, some people I think thought he might be a little bit of a redundant pick, that was not really maybe their greatest area of need. And through our conversations with scouts, with the Chiefs front office, and even him, one of the things I think learned, and Jesse wrote about this a little bit too in his evaluation of the draft, is how vital they see having a brainiac out there in the middle of things. And for all his athleticism, which I think is fine, I don't know if he breaks the charts, but more than fine. I mean, the asset in him is how he knows the game. And Sam, you asked him a little bit about it in terms of having been a former safety, and his answer to that was kind of interesting. I asked him a little bit about how he explains his, what seems now intuitive, and he talked about how he loved the game so much he just started getting into film by himself in high school. YouTube.
And he's not watching film the way, like highlights. Like he meant actual breakdowns of coverages and things like that.
Of NFL games.
Yeah, that he's
in
watching,
high school.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty interesting. And so we're always interested in how did a guy get to be how he is and who he is. But I think in a way he's a little bit of a sleeper pick to be part of the Chiefs' future. Maybe not so much in the immediate foreground. There'll be some learning, but I think he will have a pretty good learning curve. And so I'm intrigued by him. Again, he's not the most glamorous pick out there, but I'm interested in him.
He's got to be special teams right away to start.
Yeah.
He's athletic, and so he'll be out there for that. But this is a kind of a hidden need for the Chiefs, for them. And Sam, I know you've discussed this before, but the Chiefs are going to have some decisions to make with their linebacking crew coming up. And so the hope is that if you take a guy like Bassa and you use resources to get that guy, trade up to get him, that he can become the sort of, it's probably a weak side linebacker instead of middle linebacker like he played in college, but he becomes the Nick Bolton type on that side of the ball in the defense, and you can make a decision on a True Tranquil or potentially Nick Bolton down the line where you don't have to pay as much for your linebackers. Chiefs are paying a ton of money for their linebackers right now, and so at some point you want draft picks to fill in, come in, get comfortable, and then not use a bunch of resources to pay for those guys. So a really impressive guy on there, and sort of an interesting backstory to look at too, because I didn't realize he's followed the Kingsley Suamataia path. Both those guys were top 5 recruits in Utah. Both went to Oregon, and then Kingsley transferred to BYU after that. Now both are Kansas City Chiefs. So kind of interesting backfill. That's not normal. That usually.
And you asked him about that. They bumped into each other at the airport
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, just a couple weeks ago.
He's like, "Oh yeah, I saw Kingsley. No big deal." And it's like, and you weren't a Chief yet. And so it's crazy that those. I mean, you go from Utah to Oregon to Kansas City, and like high school studs in Utah together. I mean, that's kind of an interesting dynamic. But no, definitely a pick that the Chiefs feel good about. And I'm also getting a sense, Sam, that Steve Spagnuolo has a very big voice in the GM room, in the draft room, because these guys all seem like Spagnuolo fits. And we figure that Steve Spagnuolo is probably going to finish out his defensive coordinating career with the Chiefs, and they better hope so, because the guys that they took in this draft are all Spags-type players.
I think the thing I liked most about the Bassa pick is because Bassa pick is everybody, all 32 teams talk about they're going to take best player available, and then 32 teams draft based on need. And this was an example of the Chiefs declaring in the 5th round, this isn't an exact need. It's certainly not an immediate need. I totally agree with you, Jesse, that I do think it's a need for next year.
Yeah.
Chanel's in the last year of his rookie deal. Drew Tranquill has a potentially cuttable contract. And so it is going to be a need for next year. But they just said this player should not still be available here in the 5th round. I think they probably had like a late 3rd round grade on him. They needed a running back. We're all looking at what running backs are available when they're on their clock. And they just said, best player available, we're taking them. And so that's how they end up with them. And I just think that's how good teams do the draft, because they've set themselves up before the draft to conduct it that way, which is a good transition to get into one of my observations on Josh Simmons, because that's why they ended up with Josh Simmons in my mind, is you go through free agency to protect yourself, to take the risk that other teams can't afford to take on Josh Simmons, because you signed Jalen Moore anyway. So if Jalen Moore ends up starting at left tackle, like, that's fine. That's who you planned before the draft on starting at left tackle. Having said that, I did not think Andy Reid spoke like a coach who plans on sitting Josh Simmons for a year, because this is a time of year to give people context, and we probably should have laid this foundation for everything. Like, rookie minicamp is a time where Xavier Worthy looked completely lost a year ago, and Xavier Worthy had a pretty darn good rookie year for the Chiefs.
One of the best Super Bowls ever.
It's not a highly consequential time. It's a time where these guys learn the playbook. Day one, Jesse, is a time where they kind of throw all this information at them. Day two is where they throw an even bigger set of information at them to see exactly how they're handling. They're testing these guys, right? It's not the last test they're going to have. They've got OTAs and mandatory camp and training camp before the season even starts. But because of that, Andy Reid is the ultimate, it's no big deal about this weekend. With Josh Simmons, that's not how he responded to questions about it. First from Matt Derrick, and then from myself, he said, to give people the frame of what Josh Simmons is doing, he's doing all the individual drills out there already. He's not doing the stuff that requires an opponent on the opposite end of the field. He is still lining up with the team offense, but it's not when they're doing the 7-on-7, the 11-on-11 scrimmage stuff. But so Andy Reid pointed that out and said they're taking it slow. And he said, just got to make sure that thing is strong, talking about his knee. And he said, but listen, he looks like he's got some talent there, doggone it. That's what Andy Reid said.
When he goes to the doggone it,
yes,
it's a different level of excitement, animation.
Yes, that's it. That's his emphasis. That's his my overuses of italics. That's Andy Reid's italics. But I asked him because I'm curious to see what the future plan is for Josh Simmons too. I think they should learn from Kingsley Suamataio's situation last year that he's got to go win the job. It can't be the guy you want to win the job. But certainly the early indications that Andy Reid provided us, I think, were a guy that he anticipates competing for the starting left tackle job.
Let's talk about context too, Sam, because you talk about rookie minicamp not meaning that much. Let's go back to the last 2 first-round picks the Chiefs have had. Felix and Udike Uzama, they held him out because of a hand injury. We really didn't even know much about that hand injury, and they held him out of rookie minicamp. We didn't get to see him. Last year with Xavier, he had the rough rookie minicamp, but then he had a hamstring, just kind of a tweak. They pulled him out late, and they didn't do it. So they have...
He watched camp with next to Matt Nagy for most of camp. Exactly where they did.
Exactly. They have shown a history of these guys to be very, very precautious in this scenario. And here's a guy where, why wouldn't you be precautious or precautionary with Josh Simmons? Because he came off a serious knee injury. I mean, the biggest variable of this pick is whether his knee is healed or not. And so we were watching him stretch, Sam, and then we watched him go to to some of the individual stuff. We're like, oh, he's still out there. He
still has his helmet on.
Yeah, he's got his helmet on. He's still out there. And so he did more than we thought he would. And then you combine that with the enthusiasm from Andy, and this is a good sign so far for the Chiefs. It's all systems go. I mean, not all systems go, but this is way ahead of what I thought Josh Simmons would be, and it sure sounds like from the tone of voice, it's way ahead of what Andy Reid thought Josh Simmons would be at this point.
That's what stood out to me is I'm writing about this week, but we were surprised But then Andy Reid said he was surprised.
Yeah.
He said he's moving around well. I was surprised on how well he was doing out there moving. And so, like the Chiefs, the biggest question with Josh Simmons to all 32 teams were, what's his knee going to be like? And that's not only for the present, but also for the future, because this is an injury that can lead to other injuries, even if you've recovered from this specific injury. Like, there's a long medical history that is often associated. Lucas Niang never really came back once he suffered this injury in Cincinnati. But it seems like we're already quickly moving on to the secondary question, which is just, is he going to be the best guy? Yeah. Is he going to be ready to play aside from the injury? And I didn't anticipate that we'd be asking that question already now. I thought deep into training camp, maybe we'd be asking ourselves that question. I sense from Andy Reid a guy who's already asking himself that question. But let's move on to yours, Jesse. What was one of your observations?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the people that people are going to be most interested in is Jalen Royals, and he kind of had an up and down sort of rookie minicamp. We got to talk to him obviously on Saturday, and then he had kind of a bit of a slow Saturday, and including we talk about his foot injury, but not as much as maybe some of the other guys' injuries in this draft class. But he said he was 100% going in. He talked before the practice, and there were some times where he was kind of coming off the field limping a little bit. It seemed like that foot was bothering him. So I was like, oh boy, this might not be a good start for a kid who we wondered why he fell. We wondered potentially why he was a value in the fourth round and other teams didn't look at him. Maybe this is the sort of thing that's lingering, but bounced back with that. And, Andy Reid talked about him before day two and said he saw some good things the previous day. And then day two was Jalen Royals' day. I mean, he was showing some of those Rashee Rice type skills that we had talked about after the draft, Sam, where, catching the ball, getting downfield, getting upfield quickly, and becoming some of the quarterback's favorite target there. So, again, way early. It's overreaction central when you're watching two practices out there, but it was a much better second day for Jalen Royals and much more encouraged by him for the second day, because after that day one, I thought, ooh, maybe this injury is something we didn't discuss enough.
Yeah, and they fed him, too, in the passing game. They've got four quarterbacks out there, the ones, and Jesse, you've got the roster next to you. The ones that people will recognize is Chris Oladokun has been part of the practice squad for the Chiefs for a while, so he gets to come back. But otherwise, it's three rookies, but they did bring Jalen Royals, quarterback from Utah State, to be part of that, and he was feeding Jalen
Spencer
Royals.
Petras,
pretty intentionally. But my guess is that was coming from the coaches as well, not just the quarterback's preference of having familiarity with the wide receiver. But yeah, Jalen Royals is absolutely going to be a name that I think a lot of people are going to be really interested in, and we're going to be writing a lot more about as training camp comes. Vahe, let's go on to your second one.
Yeah, Ashton Gelati is
great kid. Yeah.
The presence, first of all, is great, right? And he was great on we did Zooms with all the draft picks the night they were drafted. But then it's always a little different when you see him in person for the first time. For instance, all the draft picks I thought were fairly animated and upbeat and responsive on the Zoom calls. But a couple of them were a little less comfortable standing in front of the media yesterday.
Probably their first time in that setting.
Probably, right? For a couple. He was just into the room and he'd been in there for
his was funny because he asked one of the Chiefs PR people that we were all just going to bum rush him once he stood up and got through the door. If we were all just going to go up there and basically tackle him with our microphones. And in that setting, we all sit there and ask pretty calm questions. But it was at least a good curiosity gap thing to wonder about before he got in there.
It was, and you're making me think of this. You could almost have a fun. It wouldn't really be a story, but you could almost do a little anecdotal thing about the literal entrance of each of the guys as they came in yesterday. Yeah. Who was it that came in? Omar came in with the hello, waving his hands, and Ashton was pretty at ease. Anyway, but how does that translate to anything that matters? I mean, we see that he's the energy's that way. He's referred to as the quintessential high motor guy. For our audience, the highly dedicated Chiefs fan probably already knows this, but maybe it's news to others that there's some parallels to George Karlaftis because first of all the fact that his coached Karlaftis before, there's a little bit of connectivity, and I don't know if we assume the game is exactly a parallel, but I think the energy and I meant to look at this before and I didn't. The body type I think is kind of similar, but I don't know if I don't know if the metrics are exactly the same that
George
way.
is a little bit longer, which certainly matters. I mean,
Yeah.
especially for defensive ends, but ability to get your hand on the tackle at an earlier stage. But you're right, the motor stands out, or stood out at least to the Chiefs. I mean, the thing that was common that we heard with Mike Bradway spoke that night, the Chiefs assistant GM, and then the director of college scouting, Ryan Nutt, spoke 2 days later on Monday, and they both used the same phrase, 100 miles an hour, which tells us that in those pre-draft meetings with the Chiefs when they're in that dungeon, that was a phrase they used a lot. Describing this guy.
Yeah. So, again, this was sort of, we understood that they were going to go into this draft wanting to bolster the line.
Yeah.
He'll be an interesting piece. I don't feel like I have any way of knowing how fast that means he's going to become integral. I mean, we're sitting in this room as we talk about this, remembering that 2 years ago they made the defensive end their number 1 overall pick, and it really hasn't blossomed. So there's a lot of X factors to that. But what are your guys' instincts about him?
Well, the opportunity's there.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a spot. I think when you look at this draft class as a whole, I don't know if I'm going to pick anybody other than, the comments on Simmons were overly optimistic to where I think he could start early.
Yeah, I agree.
But everybody else, I think they'll all play. I don't know if I'd project any of them to play half the snaps. But the most readily available path is for Ashton Gelati, I think, because, you already rotate at that spot. Mike Dana did not have a great year last year, and he's your projected starter. You can steal some snaps from Mike Dana, I think, to where maybe you do play half the snaps if you're in that role. Jesse?
Yeah, just a few things. Number one, we talk about a Spagsy pick. Like, do we need to know that he's going to play a George Karlaftis type of player? Well, he played George Karlaftis as a rookie, 80% of the snaps, 85% of the snaps.
Yeah, great point.
I mean, if we're looking at this as did Spags have his hand on this pick? Yeah, absolutely. For 2, Vahe, you talked about this. I know, Sam, you've mentioned the Ashton gave away most of his NIL money to charity. I mean, this is a guy off the charts when it comes to off the field stuff. Get your 97 jersey now because all your friends are going to have it too. I mean, this is going to be a fan favorite, especially if he produces, obviously. But from day one, people are going to gravitate towards him. Very interesting too, on watching him on the practice field, Sam. And I've even mentioned this to you. He wears 97, and you can't really tell, but he wears his hair down when he plays. We can't really tell as in an interview setting, but
long curly.
Curly. I got the old shades of Dan Saliamua a little bit. I mean, I know Saliamua was a bigger kind of interior defensive lineman guy, but the Chiefs guy with 97 and the long hair, it got some of the shades of that, and that long hair really does stand out. So you will definitely be able to see him play when he's out there, and you combine the high motor with the speed, with the long hair, and obviously it's somebody you'll keep your eye on.
Well, just to amplify your point one other way, I mean, Chiefs front office people spoke of him as having, character a tier above the greatest character guys they've had. That's their instinct about him. And that will resonate with fans too. I mean, and the NIL thing was, I think, brought up, as the example of that, giving away his NIL money for causes that will have been written about, but that I'm sure we'll write about again down the road here.
And it's crazy too. Just real quick, the Athletic article from Michael Silver that talked about, I don't know if you saw this, but they were in the Jaguars war room. The Jaguars were considering taking him. They were getting calls from the Rams, who wanted to trade their next year's second-round pick to take him. They were getting calls from the Lions, who wanted to give him 2 third-round picks to take him. So obviously this was a guy that was well thought of around the league.
Yeah, I mean, and the Chiefs have no opportunity to take him unless they trade L'Jarius Sneed a year ago, or we're not talking about Ashton Gelati today.
Take a swing at picking sports this baseball season with Underdog. Playing on their app is as easy as choosing higher or lower on players' stats. Get them right, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. Sign up today using promo code KCSTAR to get a gimme pick as a part of your first cash entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus credits when you deposit. Must be 18 plus and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org.
So for the last observations from Jesse and me, you should note that there's 7 draft picks out there, but there's almost 90 players out there. You've got a dozen or so undrafted signed free agents. You've got a few veterans that are allowed to come back, and then, which is like the Chris Oladokun types, and then you've got 60 tryout players. And we're each going to talk about a separate one of those. Mine is an undrafted free agent, which is Jake Brenningstool from Clemson, a tight end. The Chiefs had to pay some money to get him. There was some competition to get Brenningstool. What I thought was most interesting, because he did speak to the media, is one of the only guys in that category who we got to chat with on Sunday, was Andy Reid actually was part of the call to Brenningstool.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I said, is that the only head coach? And he said, yeah, that was unique. That tells you that the Chiefs envision this as an undrafted guy who could potentially make the team. We know Jared Wiley is coming back from an ACL injury that he injured in like week 7-ish last year. I don't think he'll be ready for training camp. He could be somebody who's doing the side stuff that we see out of camp. And therefore, I think the opportunity is going to be there for Brenningstool to potentially crack his way as a third tight end. And he was terrific on Sunday, the second day of camp, and made really a couple great catches in traffic that as soon as the ball's thrown, you're like, there's not an opening there that he came down with anyway. So I just think that's an early name. There's a long, long way to go, but that's an early name that I think we'll be watching in training camp as a guy who could make it. And then, Jesse, to kick it over to you for your last one, I'll point out again that there's a lot of these tryout guys. A couple interesting names on there. There's some local kids. Patrick Mahomes' half-brothers out there.
Yeah.
Graham Walker, a tight end that went to Rice. Of course, Patrick Mahomes isn't out there. But it's you see interesting names like that. And another one that, Jesse, your fault, that falls into that category as well.
Yeah, I mean, what's so interesting is there's tiers to this. Like, the main part of this camp is to get the rookies the playbook and be able to have them practice. But to get them to practice, you need 70 other bodies, because you can't just have one receiver go through receiver drills. You need a repetition, you know what I mean? So you have the tier of rookies who got drafted, and then you have what you talked about, Sam, which is like Jake Brenningstool, who they paid money to come. They're like, you are a priority free agent, you're going to be at training camp, we like what we see out of you, can you make the team? And then you've got about 65 guys who, as Andy Reid even said, like, these guys are trying to catch their eye. They're trying to do something in this camp that makes the Chiefs say, hey, we would like another look at you at training camp. We would like to sign you there. But it's a longest of long shots. But we've seen in the past. I know Echo Boydo was one who was a tryout kid who ended up, being a part of the Chiefs for a couple of years out of K-State. Yeah. So there was another one from K-State earlier. So anyway, I mean, this happens maybe once a year, once every other year for the Chiefs. But I wrote about Jared Casey, and this is sort of Jesse crossover season here, because not very often do I get to have a KU guy cover him at KU and then obviously with the Chiefs as well. But, he has to have one of the best backstories of anybody here. I was going back through my notes of him, and he caught the game-winning pass when KU broke its streak at Texas. They'd never won at Texas. He catches the game-winning two-point conversion, 57-56. But the story of how he did that, he's a redshirt freshman, and I went back to my interviews with Lance Leipold from that week. And early in the season, he was a redshirt freshman. He was a preferred walk-on, and they were not going to travel him to games. They take the top 6 tight ends and travel him to games. He was not one of them. Okay, so you're talking a guy. They list him at 6'2", 245. He's more like 5'9". He's about my height. But Lance Leipold even said that. I asked him the question. I said, tell me how far this kid was away from playing early in the season before they had 4 or 5 tight end injuries, and he ends up getting on the field against Texas. And he says, our offense does not have a fullback. He's like, but we list Jared Casey at fullback because there's no such thing as a 5'9" Power 5 tight end. So we're not going to list him as tight end because there are no 5'9" tight ends. We put him at fullback. We don't have fullbacks. So I basically was just protecting the kid because this is not a thing that exists. And so it was interesting for the Chiefs. He's listed on the roster here as a tight end. He comes into the room and they all have kind of their name on their shirt. He's listed as a fullback. Yeah. So it's the same thing with the Chiefs. It's like, what do we call this guy? We list him at 6 foot. He's not really 6 foot. But again, that was not the end of his story. He was, basically 7th string tight end at Kansas, preferred walk-on from Plainville, Kansas. I know, Vahe, you can speak to this a little bit because you went up to Plainville in northwest Kansas to go talk to him, his family, his coaches, but catches the game winner against Texas, but makes a big career out of it after that. He spends 4 years at Kansas, plays in 47 games. He was all first-team Big 12 fullback last year for the Jayhawks, and it's a pretty cool story that he gets to try out for the Chiefs. He gets the call from the Chiefs. They want him to come in, and now he's up there and getting to live out his dream. And Saturday, he made a one-handed catch in front of the sideline and got to go wild, celebrate with that. He was pumped, and you can tell, that's a moment that obviously will live with him for a long time. So those are the kind of cool stories. We're going to talk about Josh Simmons more. We're going to talk about Jeff Boston more. We're going to talk about, Omar Norman a lot more. But there are 65 of these names right here that it could be very close to the end of the road for them. And for them to have that moment, put on the Chiefs uniform, put on the Chiefs jersey, make a one-handed catch, that's where this weekend really can become a pretty vital thing and a cool memory. And so I did want to, shout out Jared Casey because he did make that play and obviously is one of those 65 guys that wants to make the most of his opportunity and hopefully catch somebody's eye.
I'll just add in there that you referred to my trip to Plainville. It was wonderful to go, and those are, I know for all three of us, those are the kinds of stories that we enjoy. I mean, think about this. That moment, as you were covering, you were in the middle of it. I think you were working on it on your way back from Austin. You were making phone calls, talking to the family, and then I got to swoop over there later in the week. But if I recall, that was a Texas team with, I'm making this number up, but how many sort of 5-star recruits?
It's the Storvik story for some kid.
And this guy, the 7th string walk-on
from Plainville, Kansas.
Which is a sweet little town, and his family is just such nice people. And Jesse's cousin Michelle helped me get in with people in Plainville because she knew the terrain. So it's all your points. Just ditto on how cool that is for this moment. And like you said, long shot. But he had this moment. Well,
and the other thing is, Sam asked him about it there, and I think Todd Lebo as well, just sort of, you've always been an underdog. What do you think about this? And he wants a shot. You know what I mean? Yeah. This is his shot to show it. And, who knows where it goes from here. But obviously, he's made the most of this opportunity before. He was the 7th string tight end fullback for Kansas and ended up making a pretty good 4-year career out of it. So, again, something that he can always fall back on if this is where it ends. But if nothing else, he gets his chance to show in front of the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm sure, 10 years ago, the boy in Plainville, Kansas would have been pretty proud of that.
Yeah.
We called it a vital weekend for him and a memorable weekend for him. So we'll transition to another memorable weekend for the Royals.
Oh, yeah.
Franchise record 7 home runs on Sunday. All three of us are heading out to the park tonight as we record here on Monday. Jason Stark had a great stat. They had not hit 7 home runs in any week this season. So the fact that this team broke out of it, I think it's at least worthy of mentioning that to wrap it up, because there's some notable names that hit these home runs. I mean, first of all, Maikel Garcia hits 2. Bobby Witt hits 1. Vinny Pasquantino hits 1. He's starting to heat up a little bit over these last 5 games. 3rd string catcher Molly hits 1. Michael Massey hits 1. And who am I missing? India hit 1, didn't he?
India did,
So
yes.
Jonathan India hit his first. So one question here before we wrap this up that I think is interesting for all of us is, which Royals player most needed this? I guess if you could go into a game and say it would be great if you're J.J. Picola, the GM, or Mac Quatrero, the manager, and say, this is the guy I need to get going, or it would be great if this guy could hit one out today because maybe that sparks something. Who's on your list?
Well, the one that just jumps out to me is Michael Massey, who this is supposed to be part of his game, and it really hasn't been. And he's been, we've been around him in the clubhouse. He's such an earnest guy, works so hard, and you really want to see him succeed. And this is in his wheelhouse, literally, and it sort of needs to be a part of his game, right? If he's going to really make the impact that the Royals would anticipate he would, and it just hasn't been there.
Yeah.
So
literally until yesterday.
Yeah, and I don't know that he is or isn't a guy who. I mean, everything's so psychological in baseball, right? But I don't know that he, couldn't get going without something like that. But I assume that does something substantial for him. We'll see. The proof will be in the days to come. One other quick thing on Jason Stark. If I have this number right in my head, this was a number, it's evident to all of us, I guess. But so they hit 3 homers on Saturday. That was their first 3 home run game of the season. Yeah. And they come back with 7. So I think they went into Saturday's game with 15 home runs.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So they hit 10 home runs in 2 days after 15 all season. I mean, it's just
great sign
crazy
for the Orioles pitching staff. Jesse, who stands out with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think Massey's the obvious one. We were looking it up, Sam, before we started the podcast, and like some of the WAR metrics, Massey's a bottom 5 player in baseball right now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's dire, and
he's dead last in runs created.
Yeah,
still even after this home run.
Looked at some of the swing metrics, and some of these guys, and like MJ Melendez is struggling, but he's always posted really good like swing speed scores, and Massey's have not been that impressive so far this year. So it makes you wonder about the power if that's something he can produce. But obviously that's the guy. I'll go ahead and give a shout out to Michael Garcia, because what surprised me looking at this, Vahe, was some of the advanced metrics I use, and some of the more standard ones as well. You look across the board, WRC plus, it's kind of a weighted average. You take everything you can do offensively, and you get one number. 100 is average. He just passed Bobby Witt. He's a better hitter this year, as of we're talking right now, Monday, than Bobby Witt is this year. And I don't have the numbers pulled up exactly, but if you look at their average on base and slugging, almost identical, except for Garcia is just a tick above him on all three. Yeah. So, no, listen, Bobby Witt plays shortstop, a very good shortstop. He's a more valuable player. He's been a better base runner this year. Michael Garcia, kind of strangely, has gotten caught stealing a lot. But, I mean, kudos to Michael Garcia. Who would have thought we would have said on May 5th that going into this next weekend, the Royals haven't hit that well, but their best hitter hasn't been Bobby Witt. It's been somebody else. And not only that, the young player who's coming into his own, that could be a really good sign for the Royals for years to come here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, what's going to be interesting with Michael Garcia to me is what this next week is like, because last year he hit some home runs in April, and I think his swing got a little too home run happy. So I'm interested to see how he responds after hitting a couple of home runs. Is he still what's been great for Michael Garcia this year is he's turned into a doubles hitter. So now that a couple balls have left the park, you still would like him in that same mindset of hitting in the gaps and hitting doubles, and the home runs will come.
And I think last year, just a slight tweak on that point. The point's right, but I think it was really early. He hit 3 homers like in the first week.
Yes, he did.
And I think that corrupted the thought in a way.
Absolutely. So that's why
this is more spread out at least.
But hitting a couple in a weekend, I'm just interested to see what happens there.
Let me just go real quick here, Sam, so we can get it out there. Bobby Witt Jr., 4 home runs, 17 RBIs, 9 stolen bases. Michael Garcia, 4 home runs, 14 RBIs, 7 stolen bases. Average, Bobby Witt, 306, on base 379, slugging 493. Michael Garcia, average 319, OBP 379, so the same, slugging 496. So slightly better hitter than Bobby Witt. Who would have thought that going into the season?
And then, I think Michael Massey, I think, is the answer to this, but for a
at least the immediate, right?
But I will point out Vinny Pasquantino.
Yes.
And the thing I'll point out about Vinny Pasquantino, because we've seen him hit some balls deep out of the park in this slump that he's had, but we haven't seen consistency from Vinny Pasquantino. So I'll point out that on Sunday he hit 3 balls at least 100 miles an hour. It wasn't just the home run. It was the opposite field double. It was the out up the middle that he hit off of. By the way, in those 3 100-mile-an-hour hits, one came on a four-seam fastball, one came on a curveball, and one came on a changeup. He saw 3 different pitches well enough to hit him 100 miles an hour. I think he's looked more comfortable in the box over the past 5 days or so, and this lineup, and April is evidence of it, does not function if Vinny Pasquantino's not hitting. It doesn't matter how well Bobby Witt Jr.'s hitting. Doesn't matter even if you get the supporting cast contributions from Michael Garcia and others. Your 3 and 4 hitters, we saw it last year, was the key to their lineup. Those guys have to hit. And Salvador Perez is hitting some really bad luck this year. Vinny Pasquantino just plain has had terrible swing decisions, which is unlike him. And so if he's seeing 3 different pitches well enough to hit the ball that hard, perhaps it's a sign that the chase will get it back in order, and we'll see some better things for him. So, and
I think beyond just yesterday, Sam, I think this is right. I think he's had 6 extra base hits in the last 8 days, something to that effect. So I mean, it's bubbling up a little bit.
Yeah, great point. So, all right, guys. Well, I appreciate you guys joining. We'll read Blair's outro here. They wrote word for word. Let's see. Great conversation as always. Thanks to Jesse Newell and Vahe Gregorian for sharing their thoughts. Great message, Blair. Also, serious note, thanks to our producers, Randy Mason and Monty Davis, and our editors who oversee this, Jeff Rosen and Scott Chasen, who's having a great time in Ireland, I understand. So we got a lot of people that are out of the country as we record this podcast, but the show goes on.
The show goes on, and they're still involved.
They're still involved. So hopefully we'll be back in some fashion. Hopefully Blair will be back next week on SportsBeat KC, which is presented by Underdog, where we talk all sports in Kansas City. Thanks, guys.